Welcome to Go You Are Sent. I'm Saul, and I'm excited to be joined today by James Franke.
Good to be here.
Welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you, thank you.
And off screen, we are joined by Kevin,
I'm here, guys.
the disembodied voice. And James, you're back to give us a little bit more background on just who you are.
Yeah.
To share with the world how the Lord called you to this beautiful work.
Sure. So just a little bit about who I am. My name is James Franke. I work with Family Missions Company. I'm currently the events and programs coordinator, which means I have a hand in overseeing our mission trips or short-term mission trips. And we have 2 retreat facilities here in Abbeville that host retreats from all over the place, and I oversee and manage both of those places as well. So I've been with FMC as of us recording now for almost 17 years. So I joined back in 2009, and I've been here in a number of capacities since then.
That's amazing. You've been here that long. You have a very youthful appearance. Does anyone ever comment on that?
They do. They do. I appreciate it. I hope it helps me later in life.
It is later in life now.
True.
It is helping you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, why don't you just start by telling everybody, a couple of minutes worth of just where you started out in life, what your family was like,
Yeah.
how many kids there were.
Absolutely. So I was born and raised in upstate New York, way upstate on the Canadian border. Middle of 5 kids, had an awesome family. My mom, Irish Catholic, one of 10, and a lot of her siblings lived close. So we grew up with tons of aunts and uncles and cousins all over the place. Had like a pretty normal childhood. Went to public school, played sports. My dad was is a very important person in my life. When I was 13, my dad actually converted to Catholicism, which now looking back, you can, as you look back in life, you don't always notice and appreciate things as they're happening, but when you look back, you can kind of see the effect that certain things had and how they played out. And so that was, looking back now, kind of a big moment in my life growing up. So that's kind of like my childhood, born and raised. When I graduated high school, I got to that point that every high schooler gets to of what am I going to do with life? And that's kind of where I think our story will probably begin today. And the first thing that I did when I wanted to answer that question was to figure out, as I think a lot of people do, unfortunately, in the world today, I asked the question, what can I do to make as much money as possible, as quickly as possible? So people my whole life had told me, James, you'd make a really good lawyer. Apparently I was argumentative as a kid. Or you could be a doctor. And I was like, that's like 8 years of school. I know they make a good salary. And then I was presented with this idea of becoming a pharmacist. And so I did research. I knew pharmacists made a good amount of money, which was top of my list in terms of importance, at least at that time in my life. And I found that there were a number of schools where you could kind of crunch the studies from 8 years down to 6. So you could go into pre-pharmacy, right into pharmacy, and you could become a doctor of pharmacy in 6 years. So when I was planning my own life, that's what the plan was. The plan was make a lot of money, do it quickly, and pharmacy was going to be the thing to get me there.
Wow. Well, that's amazing to hear that. You grew up in a faithful household. Mm-hmm. You had your mother was very faithful. And then usually when someone within your family converts, it's kind of like it's a reorientation for everyone in the family. And it's an opportunity for people that are chasing after the Lord, even minimally, to see one person go deep. They kind of have a strong wake and tend to bring other people with them. Before we talk about your college years, did you find that when your dad converted, like it had a different effect on the home?
Again, I could probably look back and try to pick out and point out things that maybe would have changed. In the moment, I didn't feel too much of a difference. And I think the reason was my dad was very faithful before his conversion. Like he was a very faithful Lutheran. He loved the Lord. Actually, one thing that I thought was really beautiful was that when my parents were married, and especially early on, my dad would come to Mass with us, and he would also then put on his suit and go to his Protestant service as well. And I think the reason there was my mom knew that when we got older, if my dad was still Protestant, if he was still Lutheran, that us kids would have a choice. Everyone has a choice, but we would probably have something that seemed more like a choice because we had 2 parents living the faith in 2 different ways, and we would be able to follow one. And I think she knew that if he was going to, be a Lutheran, that she wanted him to be the best one that he could be, so that we had that example, so that if we chose that we would be living that faithfully, So it was really beautiful, and my mom, she never asked my dad to convert. She loved him where he was. He loved her where she was. They both loved the Lord. But again, looking back now, as a young man, even if in the moment I didn't realize the impact, I think as a young man, anything, your father's Superman, like he can do anything. He's the best
Right.
person in the world. So when you see someone like that make a decision like that, there's no way that it doesn't have some sort of impact, even if it's not felt or seen in the moment.
Sure. Was your mother your primary catechist growing up?
So my mom was the primary catechist for the entire town. So she was she was the DRE at St. Patrick's in Rouse's Point. So she was the one who was in charge of the whole CCD program. So we went to public school growing up. So most of our catechism, yes, we did learn in the home. And then we would go to Sunday school like many people do. And that's where we got a good bit of our religious formation.
Can you remember a time as a child where maybe you were laying in bed one night and you had like an inkling that this was a personal God who loved you in a unique way from everybody else?
It's hard to, I'm sure for a lot of people who have conversions later in life, they go back and they try to see moments and see them differently or interpret them differently. I'll say I was always an intellectual kid. Mm-hmm. Like I liked learning. I felt like I was smart. I don't know if I was, but I felt like I was smart. And so when I would be taught something, like I was very much a prideful thing to, like, I wanted to learn it and to understand it and to know it and to hold on to it. And so I think for a good bit of my life, the faith was probably that. It was a subject that I wanted to know. I wanted to know it well. I believed that it was true, but I don't know how personal, again, in the moment I felt it was. Now, one thing that I give my mom a lot of credit for that I hated at the time was that we had a church parish, and every Sunday at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, they would have adoration. About 10 people in the town would show up. We had a big old church, empty, but monstrance, Jesus, our family, and a couple of random people. And we got pulled along most Sundays till 1 o'clock, which for me was quite the sacrifice, because living on the East Coast, 1 o'clock is when your early football games start. And as a Buffalo Bills fan, to have to sacrifice the first hour of a game, especially if it was being televised, to go sit in a church and listen to the priest chant Latin and swing the incense was definitely a struggle at times. But I can look back.
Was this pre-DVR days?
Oh yeah, this was pre-cell phone, pre-internet. This was pre all the things. Yeah. But going back now, you can kind of see like little moments. One thing, I must have been 8 years old, and I found myself chanting the Tantum Ergo without the book. You know what I mean? Like you're there every week, like it's gonna sink in, and that's so awesome. Like it's just like, okay, like this, whatever is happening here, like something is sinking in a little deeper way. Whether I just like music and this is like I like knowing the words or whatever, but like I could tell, again, looking back, that was something that was definitely formative. That even if I wasn't having a ton of prayer time during those moments of adoration, I was still in the presence of the one who gives it all, and he was certainly giving graces that I think later in life definitely ended up working in some powerful ways.
Heck yeah. As I'm sitting here listening to you tell the story, like what's occurring to me is like, man, you're convicting me in my belief of just how seductive our capitalist culture is. Because here you grew up in this home with mother is the DRE.
Sure.
Dad goes through this profound conversion. You spend your Sundays not watching the first quarter of any NFL football game.
Yeah.
Watch in adoration. And yet, despite all that, as a young man, you have very worldly aspirations.
Sure.
Where'd that come from?
Yeah, I mean, I think, like you said, the world is seductive, and I think the temptation too is like the world is seductive, and not always in a way that's like overtly like sinful or bad or immoral. You know what I mean? Like it wasn't like I was feeling called to do like horrible, sinful, immoral things with my life. I was just wanting a worldly life. Like I was wanting the money. I was wanting the things. I was wanting the stuff, which, again, money, things, and stuff, none of them are intrinsically bad,
Right.
but they can definitely overshadow and cloud the things of heaven that are much better. And that's all the enemy cares about. He doesn't care. I love C.S. Lewis, and I love the Screw Tape Letters. And there's a chapter in there where Screw Tape is teaching Wormwood, and he says, murder is no better than cards if cards does the trick. He's like, he doesn't need us to commit big sins. If the little things that can distract us from the Lord are enough to distract us from the Lord, like he's winning,
Right.
And so I think that was definitely a part of it. Again, not falling into deep grave mortal sin, just not pursuing the Lord.
And so, okay, so let's go back to pharmacy school.
Yeah.
So I think that I've heard lots of people say, hey, you'd make a great lawyer, or you'd make a great doctor, or you should consider being a baseball player.
Yeah.
I've never heard anyone say, you'd make a great pharmacist.
Yeah, and that's it. No one said it. I chose it because I wanted money and I wanted it quick.
Yeah.
And that was, I had some family members who were pharmacists, so I knew what it was. But yeah, that was me just chasing after money and chasing after things of the
Sure.
world.
So walk through a year a little bit. So you go to pharmacy school, and eventually you start hearing the Lord petitioning your heart to maybe try something else.
Yeah, so what ended up happening was, I went to college, had a typical first year of college. And that summer, after my freshman year, I had to do what most college students do, is I had to find a summer job. And I was like, okay, well, what am I going to do? Now, one of the other things I didn't share about kind of my childhood and growing up was that I had an opportunity from age 12 onward till 17. I graduated high school at 17. To go to a Catholic summer camp right in my backyard. It was about an hour and a half away. It's called Camp Guggenheim, and it's in upstate New York in the beautiful Adirondack Mountains. And you would go, and it was on a lake. You would swim, and you would go mountain climbing, and you would be rappelling and do all the fun stuff. And then every day they would have mass. And once a week they would have a reconciliation service that was beautifully done. They would have adoration. During the week they had a chapel right there. At camp. And then the cool thing was they would have a priest, a chaplain for the week, but all of the people in charge of the camp, for the most part, were college-age students. They were college-age students who were putting on this camp for young people. Now, as a young person, what I focused much more on was the hiking, the swimming, all the fun stuff. And then as you get older, the camp kind of transitions you. So the first, from 12 to 15, you go to a version of camp. And then from 16 to 18, they have a week for the older kids that's very much more faith-based and almost retreat focused. It feels like a week-long retreat. And so I had these moments in high school where each summer I would go for a week to this camp. And as I was getting older, again, nothing incredibly profound, but I began to have a new association with my faith that was not just in my family or something I was forced to do or Sunday school. It was seeing other individuals, especially young people, living their faith actively. And so it just, again, didn't do a ton in those high school years to totally change me or anything, but it gave me this positive association in a new way of seeing the faith a little bit differently than my parish back home, which unfortunately was, if you were, under 60 years old, you were an anomaly. The faith was a thing for people more advanced in age. And so anyways, as a young person, as a middle school or high school, I had that opportunity. And so after this first year of pharmacy school, the thought came up that I could possibly apply to work at this camp.
Okay.
And so I applied, and I didn't know that I'd get in. There's a million people applying. Everyone who goes wants to work there. So I applied, and because I applied, I decided that every night I was going to pray a decade of the rosary to try to get in. Again, one of the first times where I really had this committed idea of praying for something specifically. And eventually I heard back and that I was accepted to be a counselor at this camp. And so that summer, we showed up. We have a week where they call it staff week, and then we have 8 weeks of camp. So we're going to put on 8 weeks, 80 kids a week, so 640 kids over the summer, and it was going to be just over 2 months of serving in this place. And so when staff week rolls around, all these college kids who got hired roll in, and it began a summer for me that really was a transformative year in my life, where as a young college kid who had just gone through my freshman year of college, pharmacy school, had all these plans, I was surrounded by a group of young people, most of them like passionately in love with Jesus, which that was different for me. You know, I'd been around people who knew about Jesus and probably loved it, but to see people like passionately in love with Jesus, unafraid to share about him, it was just something that was very much I think the embodiment of like, you don't hide your light under a bushel basket, like you put it on a hill for all to see. Like these people were like these shining lights, and I saw it, and I didn't know exactly what it was, but I looked at their life. I was like, man, like that's attractive. Like that's what I want. I want whatever it is that they have. It just so happened that summer, about a third maybe of the staff were students who all were at Franciscan University.
I was just actually thinking.
Yeah, you're like, where were these kids from? It's one of these
they
schools,
were living
right?
in Steubenville,
Yeah,
right?
so they were from Steubenville. And so over the course of that summer, a lot of them, obviously I was friends with all of them, but like very much looking back now, I can put like words to what was happening, like very much felt like they were discipling me. Like they were introducing me to the Lord, what it meant to live for him, to, you know, go deeper and to have a real relationship with him. And by the end of that summer, I knew that my life was going to be different, that I was going to have a different purpose than what I thought it was, that I was going to be reoriented in some way. I was already committed to go back to pharmacy school for a year. I had been selected to be an RA in one of the dorms, so I already had committed to a semester. So I did have to go back. So I went back to the University of Buffalo, and it was during that semester where I reached back out to my parents and I said, hey, this is what's going on. This is what happened. I feel like God is calling me to go to this school. Had no idea how they were going to respond. You know, finances, like all the things, no idea. My mom was pumped. She'd watched EWTN for years. She knew about Scott Hahn. She knew about Franciscan. So she was like over the moon. And my dad was super supportive. He's like, we'll make it work, you know. So I finished that semester, transferred over to Franciscan, not knowing. So to this point still, no idea what I was going to do. I just knew that God was calling me to go there, because that was the place that apparently all these people encountered him, and I wanted the life they had. So I went there. I was like, well, I don't know. Maybe they have pharmacy. Maybe they have, like, I don't know what they have here. So I go and I sit down with an incredible man who became a mentor of mine, now Dr. Ronald Bolster, who's up there in their catechetics department. Sat down with him as my academic advisor, and he was just kind of sharing all the majors, and he threw out this one, catechetics, and I hadn't ever heard of what it was. He was the director of the department at the time, and the Lord started doing a whole bunch in me when I, like, there's just this fire, this desire kind of sprung up, and I was like, that's it, like whatever that is, that's what I want to do. So I did. So I ended up becoming a TheCat, they call it, like a theology and catechetics major. And for the duration of my time at Franciscan, that's what I ended up studying.
So did any of your pharmacy credits transfer?
So some of my like prereqs did. So there was no like, I think maybe a biology course transferred over
One
to
class.
But I did have the advantage that when I was in high school, my whole senior year was college credits. We had an AP program, okay. So I had my language out of the way, I had my English out of the way, I had my math out of the way. So even when I went to University of Buffalo, I spent a whole year, but didn't fall behind, surprisingly. Gotcha. So all my gen eds were done when I went to Franciscan. And I had a world when I was there. A lot of people listening maybe have heard of Franciscan, or maybe were students, former or past, or present, I should say. It was very different. I didn't join a household, didn't go to Austria, didn't do a lot of the things that they do, but very much dove into my studies. And fortunately found what I was looking for. I should say found who I was looking for when I was there.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So the other, that leads us to
what we're talking about.
What we're talking about here, your call to mission, that occurred while you were a student at Franciscan.
It was, yeah. So my like I said, my time at Franciscan was very atypical. It went very quick. I took my program and I crushed it into 3 semesters. So I was in and out, but my last spring semester that I was there as a senior, I had an opportunity to go on a mission trip. So for those who don't know, Franciscan University has a program called the Missions of Peace. It was actually something that sprung forth from our founder's daughter, Susanna Summers, now Susanna Van Vickel. When she was a student at Franciscan back in the day, her and Father Stan Holland kind of got together and led the first mission trips ever with Franciscan University down to General Cepeda in Mexico. And from that experience blossomed this beautiful program that they have called Missions of Peace, where now I think at the time, I don't know what it is now, someone would have to look, but I think at the time when I was there, it was something like 60 to 80% of the kids, something insanely big like that, went on mission for spring break instead of like partying at the beach.
Yeah.
So I had the opportunity to look at a dozen different mission trips that I wanted to go on. I really wanted to go to Ecuador. There was a mission down in Ecuador, but I had a friend who wanted to go on a mission trip to Mexico. And so he actually pulled me along to the Mexico mission meeting. He ended up not going on that Mexico mission trip. I ended up going. So that friend was definitely a prophetic pull.
Yeah.
The Lord used him to get me to that meeting, because I never would have gone. I would have gone to Ecuador. I would have gone to somewhere that, at least in my mind, seemed more exciting for whatever
Sure.
reason. You're a college kid. You just want to go to whatever you think is the most extraordinary, extravagant. So I was still thinking somewhat in those ways, but I wanted to go to Ecuador. He got me to the Mexico meeting, and long story short, there I ended up signing up. I got accepted, so I was going to be going down on a mission trip to Mexico. So we go through months of planning and preparing and fundraising and doing all of that. And eventually I come to find that the host organization for that mission trip is none other than Family Missions Company. So Family Missions Company has a mission site in General Cepeda, Mexico. It's their flagship mission. I knew none of this when I signed up, but that's where we were being sent, and that's where we were being received. And so when we arrived in General Cepeda in Mexico, we showed up. There were a couple other people that had added onto the group, I think a family and maybe a couple individuals, but mostly our students. And when we were there, we met up with FMC's full-time missionaries who were living there and who were hosting that trip. One of them is our current co-executive director, John Paul Papazinski, was down there as a single young man. Kevin Granger was down there with his family. Living and serving, and then another former missionary of ours, Jonathan Weiss. And so, yeah, we showed up and we dove into living a life of missions for a week. I know at another day we did a podcast on mission trips. So if someone wants to get like a super deep dive into mission trips, I'd encourage them to go check that one out. But kind of a nutshell as to what we were doing that week. So we lived in this big mission house. We were all together, and each morning we would wake up and we would gather together in prayer, which I thought was beautiful. I had begun at that point in my life to actually have a prayer life and to grow in my prayer life. And one of the beautiful things about this mission trip was, it gave me, so my faith very much at this point, I think, was still like very much being lived at Franciscan and on campus. Like when I was there, it was easy to have a routine and a way of life. This is when I went to mass. This is when I prayed. This is when I studied.
6 masses a day there.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. The port is right there. Like you have a priest every 20 feet if you want confession. Like it was very easy. And I think missions was cool that first trip because it took my faith off of campus, and it helped me to see like how easy it could be to live it out in. Now it was a very different life. Obviously you're in Mexico, you're in the desert, but like, it's not hard to wake up and pray. You know what I mean? It's not hard to schedule service into your day. It's not hard to do these things if you have the desire and the willingness to do it.
Right.
And so we would wake up and we would pray. We'd have a communal breakfast and meal together, and then we would go out and we would serve. So my project that I was working on is we actually served a local family. They had a house, so their homes down in General Cepeda are mostly adobe. So think the mud and the thatch bricks that dry in the sun, and they build them. And then the roofs are typically like murios, which are these big wooden beams, and then they have like maybe a tarp on top and some dirt and some thatch there. So this family, unfortunately, their roof had been damaged. It had fallen in. And so, when it rained, their house got wet. Part of their house that had a dirt floor became muddy. Like it just, not a living situation anybody should have. Right. And so our missionaries knew them and knew them well. And so they knew a group was coming in. And so they lined this project up with the time that we were going to be there, and we were going to be able to bring resources in order to do maybe a bigger project than they might have been able to do on their own, which is a really cool thing about mission trips. So anyways, during the mornings, we're hopping up on this roof, we're doing all the things, we're fixing it. And I just found that each morning I kind of gravitated towards the full-time missionaries, and just like wanting to know like who they were, and like, you know, because it's still all new to me. I still don't know what FMC is really. Like, I'm here, there's these people that live here apparently, but they're Americans, and so like I'm just kind of like learning
It doesn't seem real.
Yeah, it was. I'm like, this is life. Like, this was an option that I could have had. Like, I had. So each day, you know, I'd find myself kind of gravitating towards them and just like hearing their stories and who they were and like their call and their personal testimony and why they're doing what they're doing. And like, wait, I'm flying home, but you're staying here? Like, this is just what you do every day? And so it was like a week of that, you know, of like hearing stories and hearing testimonies and just, you know, not even expecting or wanting or asking the Lord to do anything, just being like open to like, I just want to know, you know, like, just tell me more. So we would do that in the mornings and into the afternoons. And then in the evenings, we would go out to the local desert communities around General Cepeda. So General Cepeda is like this town, and it's got dozens and dozens of smaller little desert communities that are, some of them are 5 minutes away, some of them are hours away, but that are all connected technically to this one municipality. So the government extends to those places, but also like the church extends to those places as best as it can,
right?
You know, so down there at the time, there was one priest, and there were our the FMCs at the time, full-time missionaries. And part of their mission was to go to these communities and to offer them, you know, opportunities to pray, you know, offer them an opportunity to come and sit in their chapel, which is rarely used if a priest can't get there often, and gather together and worship and sing and praise and beg God for miracles and dive into his word together. You know, some of these people, they can't get mass every week. There's no priest, right? You know, and so our missionaries would work alongside the local church and try to supplement what they could, you know. So they would go to these places, and we would, so as a short-term missionary on this trip, we would get in a big 12-seater van and drive into the desert and hit one of these communities. And the missionaries were like, okay, this is what you're going to do. You're going to learn this phrase in Spanish. Maybe one of us spoke Spanish. I did not. They teach us a phrase in Spanish, and they said, now you're going to go to every door in town, and you're going to walk, and you're going to knock, and when they open the door, you're going to say this phrase to them in Spanish. Essentially, they were teaching us how to invite them to the chapel.
Do you remember the phrase?
Yeah, so it's funny. I speak Spanish now, and so I probably phrase it different, but we would knock and say, hola, buenas noches, somos misioneros católicos. So we're Catholic missionaries. Les invitamos a la capilla por la oración. Like, we invite you to the chapel for prayer. And then, yeah, so they would teach us that, and sometimes they would just nod yes. Sometimes they would have no idea what we're saying because we would butcher it. But we would faithfully go every door, because that's what we were told to do, and knock and invite. And then we would ring the bell at the chapel, and eventually, to my surprise, like, people actually showed up. You know, like, yeah. I can't imagine being in the States and someone coming out to my door and be like, hey, we're going to have a prayer meeting right a couple houses down. If right now you should come. I'd
Drop what you're doing.
I'm eating, I'm doing dishes, I'm working. I'm like, but these people, like, their faith, they just like prayer, like, now, like, we're there, you know? And so they showed up. And so we had evenings of praise with them, of worship, of just our testimony. So it was one of the first times I actually got to share my own testimony up to that point, which included kind of what I shared with you earlier, just my conversion and coming to know the Lord. So that was like a week, right? So we're doing this day in and day out. But I think everything really changed, and my call, which is kind of the heart of what we're getting to today, really happened on what we call Desert Day. And so Family Missions Company on their mission trips offers all of the mission trippers an opportunity to have a desert day. And so they model it, I came to learn later, they model it based off of Jesus' example in the Gospels, right? Before or after Jesus did anything big in his ministry, the Gospels always recount something along the lines of, and Jesus separated himself and went off to like a quiet place to pray or to seek the Father, to be filled up. And so the missionaries were telling us, they're like, look, you guys have been giving all week, like morning, like dusk to dawn, like dawn to dusk, like you've been giving and giving and giving. Like, you're empty. Even if you don't feel it, like you're empty. Like today's an opportunity for you, right? To go and to be filled up. So they explained what Desert Day was. So for us, what that entailed is, again, pile us all into the vans, And we drove into the desert, and we found this little watering hole in the desert, and we were going to celebrate Mass. So this is a cool little part of the story that I like throwing in. We had a TOR, one of the Franciscans, Father Dennis, was with us, and we had forgotten to bring our folding table for Mass. Yeah. And so we're like, what are we going to do? And so Father Dennis is just like, guys, he's like, we had a bunch of, college men. He's like, everyone, go get a big rock. And so we all go out and we grab rocks. And I kid you not, we came back together, and like we still talk about it, some of the people on that trip. We put one rock down and then another. And these rocks made like a perfect, like squared off altar. Like it was just like this like beautiful, like as if a mason came and built this altar. We're like, okay, well, Lord took care of that. Let's have Mass.
Yeah.
So we have Mass, and it's incredible. On the way into Desert Day, we kind of parked the vans and we wandered into the desert to that watering hole for Mass. I had spotted off on the side like a cliff that had like a cave cut into it. And I'm adventuresome. I like things like that.
Sure.
So I was thinking like, that's where I'm going to have my Desert Day. So as soon as like Mass ended and they were like, okay, guys, you can go. I'm like running back. So like I find this cave. It's probably like 20 feet up on the side of this cliff. I'm like, okay, I think I can like get up there. So I'm like climbing, and there's like this crevice that breaks down from it. So I get up and I hop inside this cave, right? And as soon as I got inside, I knew that this cave was, I don't know if I knew anything was going to happen, but I could tell like it was going to be a good afternoon. Like it was a hot day. We're talking like mid-March. General Spade is like a mile in altitude. Like it was the sun beating down. Like it was hot. And I find like this cool, shady oasis in this cave. And I'm thinking like everyone else is going to be like sunburnt, and I'm going to be like, oh, refreshed.
The nap I just had was great.
Right. So I get into this cave, and it really is. It's got to be 20, 30 degrees cooler than outside. So I'm already like, oh, this is nice. So I get in. The cave was really dark, which was surprising. Like it was like the light came, but then it was almost like this zone where like the light like couldn't go any deeper. So it was like pretty like intensely dark inside. So I'm like sitting by the edge of the cave, and I'm reading, the scripture, and no idea what I read that day. Wish I remembered. It was probably something profound, and no idea. Like read from my Bible, and I was like, okay, put it aside. And then I was gonna lay down, and I was like, you know what? Like it's been a long week. They talk about just like resting with the Lord and just being with Him. Like I'm just gonna lay down, and that's gonna be it. And then I was like, well, I should check in this cave real quick, because if I know anything about caves, that's typically where like animals live, right? Yeah. So that's what I thought. So I was like, well, let me make sure that I'm alone in here before I decide to close my eyes and pass out for a little cat nap in the desert. So I'm like feeling around. I'm like, okay, like this is the inside of the cave. There's nothing in here with me, right?
Right.
So I feel good. I'm at the cave. I'm inside. I'm like laying there, and I kind of like stretch out. And I have remembered before I decided that I was just going to maybe power down and take a little cat nap for my Desert Day. I had remembered a conversation that I had with one of FMC's full-time missionaries earlier that week, John Paul, about his conversion and his call. And he talked about, I can't remember now exactly the words he used, but it was something to the effect of, he at one point in his life had asked the Lord to like confirm something for him that he felt like he was either being called to do or told to do, and that he wanted like this sign of like this burning heart to know that was like God's confirmation, not just him like confirming the thought to himself, you know? So I was like, well, that's cool. So I laid there and I was like, okay, Lord, like, what do you want me to do? I'm getting ready to graduate at this point, a month and a half out. I had a couple job offers to teach in some Catholic schools, to be a youth minister back home. And so in my mind, when I say, what do you want me to do? I've got like 3 or 4 options, and I just want him to like direct me to one of them. Right. Be careful when you pray. Like if you're going to pray about something specific, be specific. Because if you give the Lord wiggle room, like he's going to take it. So I was just a little too vague in my prayer, right? Like, Lord, what do you want me to do? Intending of these options, but not saying of these options. And so I was like, oh, and by the way, like, I'm just going to lay here for a while. But once you call me to something, like tell me what to do, just like let my heart burn so I know that it's you, right? So it's not just me kind of choosing. And I was like, Amen. I was like, that's it. So I'm like cozying. I'm like making my little space in the cave, and I think we had like one of these actual one of these blankets with us.
It
And
might have been this
it
one.
might have been this one. Who knows? And I was laying it down and lying down. So I said that prayer, and I just laid there for a while. And I don't know how long it was. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, could have been an hour. I couldn't tell you, but I'm laying there. And then all of a sudden, I say that I heard this voice. Now, people always ask, like, this audible, like, James, like, not that, like, it wasn't this external audible voice, but it certainly wasn't something that was, like, internal either. Like, it was this weird in-between that I had never experienced before, but enough in between that I thought that it was, like,
A sound.
yeah, I'm
Enough to make you look around.
like, and that's what I did. I looked around, so I heard, like, James, and, like, I want you to be a missionary. And I was like, what? And I was like, well, that's weird. So I was like, maybe it's hotter in this cave than I thought it was, you know?
Yeah.
So like I lay back down and just kind of ignored it. And I hear it again, like, James, I want you to be a missionary. And again, like I said, so different than like what I would have naturally thought like a thought or a feeling in prayer was, that it would have been an external, that I'm like looking around a little bit to see like, did a friend sneak in here? And are they like, James, you know, like is someone like playing this joke on me? And I realized like there's no one in there. It's not really this external thing that's happening, but it's not this completely internal. I'm like, is this what the Lord sounds like? You know, like, is this? And I just hear like, James, like, I want you to be a missionary. And it was just like this repetitive. And so then I'm getting a little nervous, like my heart's beating a little faster. And to be honest, my first response was like, no, thank you. Like, I'm good. Like, I should have been more clear before. Like, that's not a part of my plan.
I was thinking DRE.
Right. Yeah. So it's like this. It's almost like I'm arguing with God. Like, I'm like, no. He's like, I want you to be a missionary. I'm like, no. He's like, but I want you to be a missionary. And then I got to the point where I've realized what's happening, and I realized it's futile. Like, you don't argue with the Lord and win.
Right.
You know, like, I mean, you can say no, but like, I didn't want to do that either. Like, knowing that it's him, I don't want to just like reject the Lord's call in my life. And so I got to this point of like, okay, Lord, like, if you're calling me to this, like, I'll do it. And I said, but you've got to do everything else. Like, you've got to provide. You've got to give me the strength to sell everything I have, right? To pack up and to go live with the poor. You got to help me learn these languages I got to learn. And I was like, and you got to give me the strength to go home and tell my family and my friends and these jobs that everyone thought I was coming home after these years away. Like, you're going to have to give me the strength to do all that. Like, if you can do all those things, then I can say yes. And I felt like he said you would. And in that moment, I was like, okay, Lord. And then I felt like he was saying, say it out loud. And I was like, oh, come on. Like, it's like, but really, we've already gotten to this right now. I just really felt like the Lord was saying, like, say it out loud. Say it out loud. So I was like, okay. Take this big breath. I'm like, Lord, I will be a missionary for you. And as soon as I said it, like, my heart, like, sliced open. It was, like, on fire. And I always tell people, like, not like you go to Taco Bell and eat a little too much heart on fire. Like, it was like this, like, burning, like, white heat. And it took me a second, and then I realized, like, I just laid down in this cave in Mexico on this mission trip and prayed that God would call me to something and that he would let my heart burn to confirm that. And, like, the Lord literally just called me to something, and my heart is currently on fire. So, you know, we finished that desert day, and the way they gathered us is someone went back to the van, and they're like, brr, brr, brr. They like honk it 3 times, and all of us kind of like gather
out of our
like
hiding
cockroaches
places.
to we just kind of, you know, we get out and we get back, and then that evening, you know, we kind of share about our desert day experience. And, you know, at that point I had told the Lord, but I'm like, okay, like, you know, you start telling other people, like, this becomes not that it wasn't real when I told God, but, like, you know what I mean? Like, when you
have friends from Franciscan that are there with you.
Right. You give life to things when you speak them out loud. I think that's part of the power of words and speaking, you know? And so I knew, like, if I share this, like, this is a reality. This is something that, like, I'm seriously going to be pursuing. And so, like, we go around and we're sharing, and, like, I share this, and just, like, you could see, like, my friends, like, the excitement, you know. And then FMC does something really cool at the end of their mission trips where they invite anyone who might feel called know more, to go deeper, maybe potentially to become a missionary, to come up and be prayed over, and they assure those people that they will continue to pray for them as they discern their call. And so that happened that night, and I stood up. I think maybe one or two other people stood up too and got prayed over. And then, one of the coolest things happened is we flew back to Steubenville that Saturday. The following Thursday, so 4 days later, FMC was having a come and see down here in Abbeville, and all of my teammates put together money and bought me a ticket to get to come and see 4 days later.
4 days later.
Because they knew I was called to missions, and I didn't know where to... I didn't know that it was necessarily going to be Family Missions Company. I just knew he was calling me to be a missionary.
Right.
But it obviously made sense to begin that discernment with the organization with which I had that call. So
the Lord was answering your prayer again, making it possible.
He was. And those friends put money together for a ticket. I found another friend. I had a big presentation on that Thursday that I was supposed to give, stand up and present a project. And I had a friend who was willing to flop his date with me. That was supposed to be the next week. So he had to rush his project to get it done so that I could get out of mine. And my professor was like, look, if you can find someone to replace. So everything fell in place. And 4 days later, I was flying down to Abbeville, Louisiana, and coming to, the bayou and meeting this beautiful organization that I had encountered in General Cepeda. And over the course of that weekend, the Lord confirmed that not only was I going to be a missionary, but that I was going to be with FMC, which was great. And I went back to Steubenville. I finished a month and a half later. That summer, I went back and worked at that same camp. It was my third and final summer that I worked at that camp. And then in September of 2009, I didn't hop on a plane. I hopped on a Greyhound bus, a 52-hour bus ride from upstate New York to Lafayette, and was picked up and brought down here, and my life in missions began.
Dude, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
That's commitment, riding on a Greyhound bus. You are an elite group of people. I've done that.
Yeah.
Have you ever ridden a Greyhound?
It was fun.
Man, I have so many questions. Well, I took my first mission trip 10 years after you took yours. And on the first day of my mission trip, Ben Schumann, was getting all of us to go around and introduce ourselves.
Sure.
And at the end of our introduction, say, and I'm a Catholic missionary.
Yeah.
As part of our introduction, to say those words out loud.
Yeah.
And then it was very hard at first. I was watching the first few people go. And I was like, I can't believe I'm going to have to say this out loud because I don't know that I am.
Yeah.
But then I said it, and he threw me a Catholic missionary T-shirt, that said Catholic missionary in giant bold letters.
I think it's the power of words, speaking something out loud, I think makes something real. And then speaking out loud, I think helps us to realize what already is real. You know what I mean? Even if we don't feel qualified or capable, you in that moment, you were being a Catholic missionary, and that's what God had called you to. Would claim that. Absolutely.
So this all happened around spring break in March. You go back, finish school. At what point did you start telling your family and all your friends in Buffalo?
Yeah, so I think it was pretty soon after the mission trip, because they all knew I was flying down to Louisiana.
Okay.
They knew that was happening, and I think it was shortly after. It was definitely before graduation that my family knew all the job offers. I had to respond to them because I wanted to give them plenty of time to find other candidates to go and to do what they were asking. So yeah, probably within that next 6 to 8 weeks after that mission trip, everyone knew. And then I went to camp, and camp had become a family. I knew all the counselors, many of the campers I'd either been a camper with or journeyed with as a counselor for years. And so that summer, each week I would let that group of campers know, hey, I won't be back next year, and the reason is because of this, which was, sad for a lot of them and for me too, but it was also really, I think it was an opportunity for the Lord to allow me to share that call and that mission with over 600 kids that summer who now can say they know a full-time missionary and potentially, consider that call in their life later on, Sure.
Well, I know from all the people I know here at FMC that there's great, parabola of emotions associated with the call to mission.
Sure.
The highest of highs, but then it can be very difficult as well. And particularly, talking to friends and family is one of those times where it can be really difficult. Do you have any battle scars from those conversations?
Yeah, not really with friends and family. I mean, I think some tears, some sadness for sure, especially with just like the unknown part of it. Obviously when I joined, FMC asked for a 2-year commitment.
Right.
So for all intents and purposes, people thought like, oh, well, he'll be back in 2 years. It's been 17 years and I'm still down here.
No one tell James his
Right.
terms up.
That's right. Yeah, no one let me know. Yeah, so not really battle scars. I think it was probably a blessing that people thought it might have just been 2 years for them and for me, And then once someone begins a new chapter of life, it becomes the new norm and it becomes a little less foreign and a little less different. But yeah, it's definitely ups and downs. Like felt the very much high, and then, I can share that even during my intake, there were times where I was like, is this for me? Like, I know what it is he's calling me to it, but like, do I want to do this? And part of it was, it was for whatever reason a time where, I was still like looking for community. One of the biggest blessings was during my intake, some of the full-time missionaries, 2 young men, Jonathan and John Paul, who were in the field, actually came back to Big Woods for a couple months to stay, to get ready for our intake to be wrapped up, to be commissioned, and I was likely going to be their mission partner, so to come and to get to know me. And so like what I would probably say was one of the tougher moments of feeling like maybe some loneliness, maybe like I was by myself. So I loved my intake, great friends with everyone who was in my intake, but it was me and 6 women. And so there were some struggles as like the only man to feel like I had community and friends that I could relate to in certain ways. And so that was definitely one of those, like you said, the parabolic up and down. Like that was probably like a tougher moment for me, even while I was here and wanting to say yes. But as the Lord does, he provides, right? And so he provided 2 brothers. He's like, nope, y'all go back and help him out, because I think I want him here for the long haul, So
you also were learning at the feet of this giant of a man.
I was blessed. My intake was one of the last several intakes with Franke and Jeannie, our founders, who were giving us formation and teaching us, and it was really cool. It was an opportunity to learn. Obviously, their life and missions, the decades as families, the firsthand stories. There's something profound and powerful to that. So yeah, owe a lot to
Do you
them,
have
for
any?
sure.
I'm sure you have some good Frank stories.
Oh, Mr. Frank. I love Mr. Frank. He, the thing that'll stick with me forever. And a lot of people who were around here at the time when Frank was here, they still call me this, but I was the only guy. And so I don't know if he did this with all the guys, but for me, I became Brother James. So if he needed me, if I was in the living room, he was in the kitchen, I would just hear, Brother James, and I would, hey, Mr. Frank, and I would pop on in. And so it's just a very, fond memory of just, I feel like a little special relationship him and I had. And then when I finished my time as a full-time, like foreign missionary being sent out, after my intake, I was sent out. I lived in full-time foreign missions. Frank and his son Joseph called me back and asked if I would be willing to work for the organization, Family Missions Company, to lead their mission trips for years. And so Frank and I sat at desks about 8 feet apart for several years. And so I got to pray with him in the morning and then walk over to the office and work with him all day. And then obviously we lived, in the same premises. So
sure.
Yeah, had a great
So
time.
outside of the Summers family, you knew him pretty well.
I was here for a good little while with with both of them. So
yeah, when I came along 10 years later, like he and Jeannie were really starting to, step back, I think, and but I did get to meet him then.
Yeah.
During my come and see. So
yeah, no, incredible man.
Very much so. Well, like what surprises have occurred to you in your time with FMC and serving the Lord on a daily basis?
Yeah.
What are some things about mission life like you wish somebody had told you when you were at Franciscan?
Yeah, I think one thing that, again, I don't know if it's personality. I joined when I was a single young man, but one thing that I share with people when I share typically my call to missions and just like a call in general to follow the Lord is the reality that you're not going to lose anything by following Jesus. Like there's nothing that you're going to miss out on. I think the temptation, the enemy or even the world tries to put up is like, oh no, following Jesus is boring, right? Following
Right.
Jesus means you won't have fun and you won't be a fun person and no one's going to want to be. And like, couldn't be further from the truth. Like my life with the Lord and following him, especially in missions, became something more exciting and incredible than I ever could have imagined for myself. You know, I know my time in missions was a little different because I had the opportunity to lead all these mission trips all over the world. But if someone told me when I was 18 years old, like, hey, there's a way to go out and have this, I guess, career, this calling, and you know what, you're going to stand on the Great Wall of China, you're going to swim in the Amazon River, you're going to hike up volcanoes, you're going to be driving in a Humvee through Africa, you're going to travel across Southeast Asia, I'd be like, that sounds pretty exciting. And if they were like, oh, that's missionary life, I'd be like, wait, what? Like, you know, and it was just, and again, that's not everyone's story. Everyone's call is different, but the truth is still like, life is exciting with Jesus, you know, and for me, missions showed me that, and following him in whatever way he's calling you to follow him, you're not going to miss out on anything. You know, if he's calling you to something, say yes, because it's going to be something better than you ever could have dreamed for yourself.
Right. That's really what it boils down to. It's so far beyond what you can imagine would be the best case scenario.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
I've always fancied myself to be someone that likes to have fun, but there's nothing that's as fun as possessing like this deep, abiding joy.
Absolutely.
That comes with saying yes when the Lord asks you to do something. And
100%.
That's what convicted me when I went to Generosa Cepeda, was seeing all of these people living in poverty, missionaries included.
So joyful, huh?
And they were so joyful, and it was intoxicating and seductive. And like I was living the American dream, so to speak. Why would I find that seductive or attractive in any way, shape, or form? But I couldn't get enough of it.
And now you're that to someone else.
And hopefully,
you know? Like for me, that was like I shared earlier. Like my call was like, I left pharmacy school and all this potential money because I saw all these happy college kids, you know, these joyful college kids who had this joy that surpassed anything I'd ever experienced, you know. And when you have it, as you know, praise God, we've been able to find in the Lord, like our call becomes to be that for other people, you know.
Amen. Well, from your lips to God's ears.
Here we go.
Kevin, you've been awfully quiet since we introduced you.
I've just been soaking it up, loving hearing this testimony. And I think probably I was maybe I had the biggest impact on you.
Absolutely.
On that mission trip.
Absolutely. 100%. Kevin with his long hair, flip-flops, playing his guitar.
He hasn't stopped wearing flip-flops.
Yeah, he cut his hair, though. Still looks good.
I do say one of the side benefits, very high on the list of benefits of being a missionary, is getting to wear blue jeans to work.
There you go.
Instead of banker clothes.
There you go.
So,
the Lord loves us as we are.
Absolutely. Well, James, thank you so much. I don't think this will be the last time you're sitting in that chair, but I appreciate you joining us.
Good to be here.
All right, thanks.
So, God bless.
You can learn more about Mission Life or supporting our work at FamilyMissionsCompany.com. Please also follow us on social media. God bless.